Welcome to the Studio Talk podcast. I'm Xiomara Sosa, your co-host. Every week, we speak to our community members to teach them about mental health through education and awareness, and our hope is to inspire them through social change advocacy. We also interview community members and other mental health professionals, clinicians, healers, students, and wellness professionals. Our style is storytelling. Everyone has a mental health story to tell. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional and is not a substitute for psychological diagnosis or treatment. It's purely educational and purely social change advocacy. If you find yourself in any sort of mental health emergency or distress, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room. Hi everyone, this is your co-host Xiomara, and today our episode is going to be all about self-care, what it is and what it is not. Right, Victoria?
Oh yeah, we're excited to get into this one.
Yeah, and so this is probably going to be like a short and sweet one, if you can believe it, because, when have we ever done that?
We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Anyway, so we're going to try to make it short and sweet, because this one is really one of those things that there's a general idea of what it is, and there's what we think it is. And then at the end of the day, it's pretty much what's going to work for you, because my self-care list is not the same as Victoria's necessarily. But I do want to get into some of the what it is and what it isn't, because, it's just another one of those things as I feel has sort of been hijacked, by mainstream, and it's gotten just really, we're being very misinformed on what self-care is. Not to say that a lot of that stuff is bad for you, but that's not really what we mean when we say self-care. So, right, Victoria?
Yeah, exactly. I feel like I don't even like using self-care. I feel like almost cringy saying it.
Yeah.
Because I know how a lot of people are seeing it in society, which I don't even know. I don't even know where it came from. I mean, whenever I think about, I like Parks and Rec. That's like one of my favorite shows. And one of the characters on there, oh my God, I can't remember his name. It's fine. They talk about, they have like treat yourself days.
Yeah, treat yourself days.
And they go out and they basically spend so much money that they don't normally have. They pamper themselves. They go out, do manicures. It's just so material.
That's not self-care, guys. That is not self-care.
No.
But that's a great example of what's happened. It's been hijacked. And I remember feeling that way about, like the whole yoga movement. It started out as going down the right path, and then it's just sort of turned into this cottage industry where yoga became all about everything other than what it was meant to be, with the exception of very few people who I see now really do practice it in the way that it was intended to be practiced in the first place. And self-care, I just think, is one of those things that, not that there's anything wrong with that, people, but we just kind of like want to bring it all back to what we mean by that in the mental health realm, okay? And when we talk to our clients and we say, what's the self-care that you're taking care of, and give them ideas on what to do, where we really mean for that. Okay, so the whole treat yourself sort of concept, like Victoria was talking about. First of all, you do not need to spend money to provide yourself with self-care, okay? You do not need to spend money for it. However, a lot of people have now decided that spending money on their manicures, on their pedicures, on their whatever spa day and whatever all else there is to do, drink wine and have dinner and whatever, all of these things are part of their self-care. And perhaps in theory, I guess, it might, or in practice, maybe.
It depends.
It depends. Maybe it is. It's definitely not something that's negative, okay? Mm-hmm. There's nothing negative about doing these things for yourself. But that's not necessarily what self-care is in terms of what we would like to see more of our clients doing. And so by self-care, what we mean is checking in with yourself emotionally, checking in with yourself psychologically, checking in with yourself mentally, even physically, checking in with yourself physically to see where you're at and what, like, one of the clues for me when I'm needing self-care is I get very clumsy. All of a sudden, I'm like bruising my arm and my leg because I've, turned the corner and hit my leg up against something. And like, I'm really not taking very good care of myself that day and sort of just flying through the day, doing this, doing that, and taking care of everybody else and whatever. And I don't realize, that I have not done any self-care for myself. And it starts showing up by me being clumsy and me like dropping things. And then I get more mad and more upset and more, what the hell? really, when that's happening, I try my best to stop myself and say, you need to check in with yourself, and because those are normally my cues that I'm not. Have I eaten? A lot of times, no, I haven't. Have I had enough water for that day? Have I had too much stimulation from everybody around me and their issues and their problems and their anything and everything else, and I'm not appropriately taking care of me and sitting down and wondering what's on my mind, what's bothering me, what's triggering me, what kind of self-soothing do I need to do? That is what we're talking about when we say self-care in the mental health community. We normally would not give anybody, not that we give prescriptions, but we wouldn't give anybody homework with a prescription, quote unquote. Okay, well, what I want you to go do to take care of yourself today is to go to the spa and get yourself, a facial treatment. And, like, that's not what we would tell people to do. Not that there's anything wrong with it, because more power to you. But that's not necessarily what's going to address those issues that require us to give ourselves some self-care. Yeah. So, if you're binge watching TV, let's go through this little list I like that you have here. Is this self-care or self-sabotage?
Because I do think those two can definitely get mixed up just because of how we view what self-care is from society, is doing things that give us pleasure.
Yeah,
right?
And how it's being promoted.
Yes.
Anything and everything now on social media, especially social media, all the influencers, quote unquote. Today's my self-care day. And then you see their whole entire video and it's all based on pampering. Yeah. I've just pampered myself all day. I've just spent a whole lot of money. I've just done, not that there's anything wrong with that. I keep saying that. But that's not really self-care, but that's being promoted as self-care.
Yeah, which more likely it's avoidance.
Yeah.
There's something going on with us internally, and instead of dealing with it and sitting with it and figuring out what's going on, we're going on Amazon and spending $1,000 that we don't have. So that's an example of self-care or self-sabotage that is disguised as self-care, is spending too much money that you do not have. Yeah. Right? Or
it's like that concept of retail therapy. How they normalize that. Let's go shopping. That's going to take care of my bad mood. No, it's not. It's going to give you a temporary relief of your anxiety or whatever you're feeling. And then tomorrow you're going to wake up with, this big credit card debt or whatever, spending money you really should not have spent, and still have whatever it was that you didn't deal with. So,
or feeling worse.
Yeah. Feeling worse.
Some other, activities that I put on here: binge watching TV. This one is kind of a personal one for me because I have definitely said I'm going to, self-care. I'm just going to do whatever I want today, focus on myself, and I'll watch 8 hours of TV. And then I feel like shit afterwards, I get
all lethargic and overeating. What the hell did I just do?
Or I'll sit down with, a gallon of ice cream and watch 8 hours of a show. Yeah. And that could be seen to some people as self-care, right? But I feel horrible afterwards. And so, no, in moderation, sure, those things can be fine, but that's not self-care.
Yeah. And not to say, listen, if some horrible thing just happened to you, like your boyfriend just, or your significant other just did some horrible breakup thing with you, and you need to do 8 hours and eat ice cream, we're not saying that those things don't have their place. They do. But generally, the way people are using the term self-care right now is not, it's not providing you the service that it needs to really be providing. So that's a great example.
And it's also personal. I think we always need to go back to self-care is very personal. What has worked for one person is probably, or it might not necessarily work for you. Like Xiomara was saying, sometimes you do need to just kind of sit down and relax and recharge and maybe eat some sweets. For me personally, that's not good for me because it does put me in a very, very negative mindset, so,
right.
What else? Any other self-sabotage?
Oh gosh, there's a lot. I mean, overindulging in any sort of luxury is not self-care, it really isn't. It's nice, it's lovely, and it's great to do if that's your thing, if that's your thing and it works and it, whatever, but that is not necessarily what we would feel self-care is in terms of your emotional well-being or your psychological well-being. What we're really talking about is checking in on how you're feeling, what you're feeling, what's happening. How are you going to self-soothe? Are you going to self-soothe by doing something that's going to literally help you process whatever that is that you're feeling? Or are you going to self-soothe by, I don't know, drinking a whole lot of wine and getting goofy and having a good time, but then still not having that situation resolved, So, again, everybody's going to figure out what that balance is. But I think trying to find the balance, the peace, and, getting back to your baseline, whatever your baseline is for normal in your life, is what self-care is. And if you're so far away from your baseline of what your norm is, what your calmness is, what your peace of mind is, what you're generally feeling good and okay is, and you're far from that, then whatever self-care process it is that you need to do to get you back there and be able to stay there as much as possible is what self-care is. Yeah. So not to say you shouldn't eat, your little chocolate cake if that's what you want, but how often are you going to need to eat that chocolate cake in order to get back to your baseline, and how long does that last, focus on activities that fill you up.
Yeah. And I love that you are saying that the first step is knowing yourself. That takes a lot of practice. And we've talked about that before, how, we both feel like majority of people don't spend enough time checking in with themselves. How am I feeling in this moment? What am I needing right now? If you're not able to really identify what is going on with you, then it's really hard to pick the self-care that you need to apply to that. And that's very personal too. If you're struggling with, if you're struggling with exhaustion from burnout, then going to get your nails done is probably not what you need in that moment.
No. And there, different things are going on in your life at different times to do self-care. When we had my mom in hospice last year around this time, the hospice people were really great about defining what that looked like for people who are, and you get busy, I get into get it done mode and organize, and that's sort of like how I was surviving the whole thing. I was completely out of it mentally, but looking at me from the outside in, it looked like I had my shit together, and I was like so organized and so on top of everything and so directive and so like pragmatic and so all these things that everybody's used to seeing me in. But inside, I was absolutely and totally gone. Like I was so burnt out and so like crashed out and so whatever. I was beyond survival mode, right? So one of the things that the hospice nurses and pastors and counseling people and all that would remind me, and they were just really good at doing this, because once I got done getting everything together and whatever, I would go to the bedroom and I would just lay in that bed, and I would feel nothing, hear nothing, see nothing, smell nothing. I mean, I didn't laugh, I didn't cry, I was just and they would come in and they would remind me, have you eaten today? Have you taken a shower? Have you gone outside and have you had some water today? Have you sat in quietness and done nothing? like they checked in to make sure that what was self-care necessary for me to get through that whole process of hospice and my mom and everything else. They really made a big effort at reminding me what self-care was. And they're right, because you know what? Pedicure and manicures and bubble baths and whatever wasn't going to help me like during that time. Of course, they would have been helpful and that kind of thing, but that's not what they were talking about when they talked about self-care.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of like the hierarchy of needs, and recognizing like what level am I at right now for what I need. When you're in the throes of grief, sometimes self-care looks like what you would consider like basic, like am I eating, am I showering, what do I need to be functioning right now?
And am I asking for help? That's the big thing that they had, because I don't do that. And they would say to me, have you asked anyone in your family to help you with something? We want you to at least think of one thing that you can ask somebody to help you with. And then, I mean, it took all the energy I had inside of me to think of those things. And then the way that I could do it was via, sending little like group whatever. And it just sounded like I was like Miss Executive over here. But that took all my energy. It wiped me out completely. And so that self-care process was helpful. Now, for us, for example, when we have long days, we sit and we really take on, in a lot of ways, other people's burdens and troubles, and we listen to a lot of things. So there's this thing that can happen to counselors and therapists called vicarious trauma, right? And it's very, very, very real. And it basically means that we don't necessarily go through the trauma that they go through, but because we live it, we listen to it and we experience it and process the emotions and everything with our clients vicariously through that, we're kind of traumatized in a lot of ways. So that's why it's important for us as mental health providers to really do our self-care and take care and make sure that it's the appropriate kind. So I don't know what yours is when you go home, but a lot of times when I go home, I was telling Victoria the little story of my little raccoon family that now lives in my mom's memorial garden. And like, so to me, that's my self-care. That to me, it sounds silly. I spend no money doing it. You know, I throw bird seed out there and whatever, but I sit on my chair at the end of the day when I'm done with clients and everything else to process the heaviness of everything that you hear all day long, and that you just have to process it. And journaling is one way that I do self-care. I'll sit there and I'll do like a mental dump on anything and everything. I'll do that. I'll listen to a certain kind of music that has certain beats or whatever. But when I'm looking out the window and the little raccoon family comes along, they like come along and they're playing and they're eating and whatever, that to me, like 5 minutes of watching them do their whatever is like a magic pill for me. And that's helpful for me. It doesn't have to be like that for everybody, but that one little thing, the sound of a 3-year-old giggling. I mean, what's more special than a little toddler giggling, like anything. So I just want to bring everybody away from this concept that, I can't afford to do self-care. I can't afford to go out there and, whatever it is that everybody does for the weekend or whatever. That's not really what you need to do. Those are all little luxuries and little pamperings and little things that it's nice to do for ourselves, but that's not self-care. Is there something in particular that you do when you go home that you need some self-care after your clients, or? I
have multiple. I would say that, one thing is I kind of just turn my phone off. And, I'll come home. I live with my boyfriend. And if I come home and I'm like, hey, today was a really tough day, I don't have any energy left.
Yeah.
And I need to go be by myself for about an hour.
Yeah.
And I will, I'll go upstairs and just kind of be by myself for about an hour. I think some other things that I do is watching something really mindless on TV, right? I don't have to think about it. So for me, it's reality TV. I don't even care who's going to judge me for that. I love reality TV. And because it's so mindless, if I'll come home, I'll watch like 90 Day Fiance episode.
You can't really get invested in whether or not, like, these are people who are obviously doing what they want to do, and they're entertaining the hell out of you.
Yeah. Or like you said, being outside for a little bit. We just installed some turf in our backyard, and some lights out in the backyard, and so sometimes just sitting out there and watching my 2 nutcase dogs chase each other, that gives me a sense of peace and release. And I think that's important, is noticing how you feel after doing a quote-unquote self-care activity.
Yeah.
Do you feel refreshed afterwards? Do you feel at peace? Do you feel better? That's one to put in the books, to remember for next time. If you feel worse afterwards, maybe not.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because feeling depleted is part of why you need self-care anyway. Yeah. That's really so if what you're doing requires you to have to put out more energy or give somehow out of your wallet, out of your time, out of your whatever, and instead of it filling you up, you're now giving more, and that's your answer to how you're providing yourself self-care. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I'm just saying think about other options to add to that, because there's nothing that can bring a sense of peace and a sense of balance and a general feeling of wellness than you actually providing yourself with your basic fundamental requirements. And that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So do we really have an issue with a self-care practice being taking a bath with candles and essential oils and salts and bubbles? Not really, right? I don't see anything wrong with that. I just think that needs to be maybe part of what's considered self-care, because right now everything that's being touted as self-care seems to revolve around those things, and that's what sort of is alarming to me. It's like those are not magic pills. Like they're not gonna.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying. Like, it's not a magic pill, because
Yeah.
self-care, at least in my opinion, does not always feel good in the moment. Like sometimes going to the gym is an act of self-care, even if I really, really, really don't want to, right? Sometimes I know that, hey, I've got, my shoulders are up to my ears with tension,
Right?
and
Ugh.
I need to go work this out somehow, even though I hate it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, going into doing and producing mode is what some people do, but it can be a distraction as opposed to self-care. So,
Yeah.
be careful with nourishing. Going to the gym is obviously going to nourish you because it's going to get all your endorphins and all your, chemicals and everything going. And those are all feel-good things. And we like that. And it's good for your body. Movement is part of what I consider to be really good self-care, and I don't do enough of it. But I have to, I'll be very honest. Since my mom passed, prior to that, it was nothing but a decade of constant. I was burnt the hell out. Like, I was burnt out. Just talk about vicarious trauma and burnout and nervous breakdown, all that kind of stuff. By the time my mom died, I was spent, really spent. So what did I spend basically the last year doing, which was my self-care? Sleeping.
Yeah.
I slept. I have been sleeping like I never slept forever before that, like for a long time before that, and not just going to bed, passing out and then waking up and then going through your day again. Like, literally, it was the first time that I've been able to rest my mind, my body, my soul, everything unconditionally, with no kind of pressure from other people necessarily. Like, I still have my things that I'm obligated to do, and I have my little whatever, but at this point my life is so much more balanced. But what I've been allowed to do in the year is really nothing. Like, what I have to do, get it done, and then I can do nothing. Yeah. And it's been the best self-care for me, is to literally do nothing. Like, nothing that required my energy, nothing that required my thinking, nothing that required my emotional anything. Like, I just needed to just be, and I was able to just be and sleep. I slept a lot. I did a lot of sleeping, and it wasn't like depressive sleeping. It was sleeping because my mind, my body, my soul, everything needed rest.
Yeah, and that's the perfect example of what we've been talking about. It's looking inward, discovering what you need, what your body needs, what your mind needs, what your soul needs, and then giving yourself that gift. Self-care is a gift that you give yourself, And so sometimes it's just doing nothing, or sometimes it's sleeping, or sometimes it's,
Like, there was this, I really got into this. YouTube has like been like a thing for me, YouTube videos now. There's like this whole community on YouTube that really did a lot of hygge, which is just like this cozy home sort of calmness and all that. And then they also did a lot of simple living videos and a lot of back to basic stuff. And I really got into these women all over the world who, for some reason, a lot of them have been burnt out. A lot of them have crashed and burned. A lot of them had been through great losses, and some of them just got sick of the hustle culture and all that kind of stuff. And I watched a lot of these women on these videos, document their lives, and it was very entertaining. It was very mindless, like you said. But what happened was I really resonated with the whole quiet, simple, still kind of time frame and I gave myself that whole year. Like, I gave myself, now that we're doing this little things like the podcast and all that kind of stuff, I'm kind of coming out of that and wanting, in my business, I'm now 5 days as opposed to 3 days. So little by little creeping back out. But that was self-care. That whole be still, have a simple life, be quiet, just go within and be calm. You don't need to be out there rat racing with everybody and keeping up with the Joneses and whatever all else there is, and taking care of people who are just going to, like, implode your world anyway in some way, shape, or form. So I have a little list that I do want to go. So the point of that was, if it fills you up, and it filled me up to do that. So, give some thought to that. I do want to go down a little list, and I will put this in the show notes. This is a list that I came up with for myself based on stuff that I got off the internet during my past year of healing and recovering and self-caring. And I'll put it on, and you guys can download it and make it work for you and however you are. And I don't do everything on this list. I choose from any of these things on this list. to do something every day for myself as part of my self-care. So physical self-care, what does that look like? I think it looks like eating nutritious foods. It's really that simple. Yeah. Eating nutritious food as opposed to junk food and drinking and fried food and crap food all the time.
Not as fun.
Not as fun. Unless you're me and you cook really yummy stuff right now, because I am that person. No, but it's still not. It's not the same thing as going and getting a burger and fries. But you eat that long enough and, so... drinking nutritious drinks. I'm all about my coffee, so I'm never going to give up my coffee. But I've really started drinking a lot of lemon water and a lot of black and green tea. Who knew I liked that? I like my chai tea. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Thai tea. I love that. But who knew I would like, the green tea? I don't know. Anyway, little things like that. Eat regularly. How many people eat regularly now? Not very many people. They just kind of eat on the run and what they have. Yeah. Eat regularly. Participate in some sort of movement. I love Tai Chi. That has helped me.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, in the last year, it has helped me just heal and recover and find my sense of well-being. Yeah. Love it, would recommend it. But for someone else, it might be yoga. It might be Pilates. It might be stretching. It might be whatever it is. Just movement. Mm-hmm. And, you don't have to be an Olympian, okay? Like a major athlete. It was just talking about basic, simple little things. Get enough sleep. Mm-hmm. This whole hustle culture that, I made it through the week on 1 hour sleep. No, that's not self-care. Yeah. Sleep, get enough sleep is different for everyone. So just figure out what works for you. If you're sick, rest. That's self-care, right? Personal hygiene. For those of us who have mood disorders, that's the first thing that kind of wants to get kicked to the curb when you're having an episode. Like, don't make me get up and brush my teeth and take a shot. Like, really. But those are the things that show yourself that you're caring for yourself. Mm-hmm. Is brush your teeth and comb your hair. I used to go days without combing my hair. And it was an expression of needing self-care, And then the big one is follow your medical recommendations. I don't know how many clients in my assessment, when I do my first intake assessment with them, and I asked them when was the last time that they went and got a checkup. Yeah. Years and years and years ago.
That's been really astonishing to me too.
Wow. Yeah. And that's understandable because, we don't have insurance, or we do have insurance, like whatever all the very legitimate reasons are for not going, but it's still something that, yet we all are running around with like smartphones and this laptop and that thing and whatever, but we're not paying whatever it is at the doctor. Just get a checkup. I'm not asking you to get surgery, but get a checkup, and that's self-care. Follow whatever it is that they're recommending that you follow, if they're saying lay off the fried food. These are just little ways that you take care of yourself, Spiritual self-care. There's a whole, slew of things that people can do, with that. And it's all very individual. But, for me, I love guided meditation. Because if I try to just meditate without guided meditation, I start thinking about the raccoons and I start thinking about the podcast. I start thinking about anything and everything else. But guided meditation sort of keeps me going, I listen to meaningful podcasts. Like lately, that's been my thing. I really like that, but someone else, like I've asked clients if they can listen to it and they're like, oh, no, I can't. But they can do things like, I have them check into what the values are for them. What are your life values? Like, what is it that's important to you? And are you living that? And a lot of them are like, no, I don't even know like what they are. And once you figure out what it is and you align your daily practice with that, that is self-care.
Absolutely.
You don't have to burn a candle to do that. You don't have to burn incense for that, even though those things are great and I would recommend them. Mm-hmm. But this is how you get in tune, I think, with yourself. So then the next category is, of course, social relationships, self-care with how you really manage those relationships and what you accept in your world. For me, I love spending time with my dad. I think he's hysterical and he's funny and cracks me up. But then there are times when I need a break from him, So I had to learn to be able to be okay with asking somebody else to kind of like sit with him. And now that he's really in his day program is not a thing. But, do you have something that you do like in terms of like, do you do any sort of people related self-care?
Yeah. So this is kind of a big one for me because for me, it was boundaries. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of counselors particularly get into relationships and friendships where it is a bit one-sided, right?
Yep.
Because we naturally are people who want to give, we're caretakers, we're people pleasers. You know, these are all things that most counselors have to deal with. And so part of my self-care was actually getting rid of a few relationships in my life, you know, which was not easy, which was not fun. I would much rather get my nails done than have to end friendships that were no longer
that just sucked the life out of you, you mean?
You know, and I think especially in this profession, you know, we realize that we only have, well, this is for everyone, you only have so much energy to give, right? And so if you're having to realize, like, I can't give as much energy as I have into this relationship, that to me is self-care, because you're respecting your boundaries and your limits, right?
Right. And, you know, and what about the negative reactions that people have from that? Because I know what I've experienced is you know, you can give it to everybody else. Why can't I get as much as you give to whoever and whatever else? And it's like taking care of a mother with cancer, or living through the slow dying process of my mother with cancer cannot possibly be compared with that. How much more can I give you? Because I'm only giving, you know, this person. So like, how unrealistic is that? How unfair is that? And also, this is a package deal anyway. Like, you can't come into my life and then like what? So I went, you know, through and I didn't realize how much of my energy was being sucked out of me from the burden of what is required to even be remotely considered like you're doing enough, until the people aren't there anymore, until they're just, whether you did it or they did it or it happened, it doesn't matter. Once they're no longer, and you're spending enough time resting, and you realize, wow, how much, even though they don't perceive that they are getting so much from you, and whatever little bit you even had to give the world in general was going to you, but that wasn't enough. So you know what I'm saying? And now as it's been replenished and is being replenished, and the burden of having someone else feel loved or better or whatever is no longer there, you kind of feel like, what in the hell was happening to me there? Like, what was being sucked out of me, like an emotional vampire or something? And that is self-care, and recognizing, and it has a lot to do with the fact that you're perceived as this never-ending source of givingness to everybody. So everybody wants what they consider to be the appropriate amount of you. Otherwise, fuck you, basically, is the attitude. Otherwise, fuck you, you're not giving me enough, you know. And once you recognize that you either get rid of those people or those people take themselves out, you know, you realize that actually is self-care for me not to have that kind of stuff. You know, like I need people around me that can be, not take. They don't have to give either, you know, like give, but just sort of just be. Like, just be there and kind of like enjoy and be calm and peaceful and you know, grateful, and because we don't know if we have tomorrow. I mean, if nothing, that's what we've learned in the last few years. So that's a great one. That's a really great one. I think, you know, this list has meeting new people. I'm trying to incorporate that into my world now. When I have enough energy for that, I'll do that. But you know, having important conversations with people, I think, has become more important to me now. I do a lot of little self-care moments in my world, and then I tap out. You know, it's like, okay, I can't do it anymore. But that is enough. Like I really, that connection, I think, with people who are meaningful, I excluding them is not part of my self-care. I have to include them, and I do that now. So, but you know, for other people that might not be an option.
Yeah, and I think on the social aspect of self-care, also not the most fun part of self-care is addressing maybe some difficult conversations you need to have with a loved one or a friend. You know, that there's been this kind of, I don't know, unspoken issue between the two of you, and it's probably causing a lot of anxiety and resentment between you. So self-care can look like, okay, I'm going to sit down and actually talk with this person, you know. Yeah,
instead of acting out and behaving badly or allowing that other person to behave in certain ways against you. So I think that's very important. And then the last little section is the mental and emotional self-care. You know, I think this is a great one, especially for those of us who are all into mental health. You know, sometimes things happen in our lives that just life itself kind of forces us to stop thinking about what our own strengths and achievements are. I am not above that. Like, literally, I stopped remembering what my strengths and my achievements have been just in the last 10 years alone, much less in the last 5 or 6 years. Like, I stopped allowing myself to think of what those things are as a direct result of other people and other things and other circumstances and other everythings because they couldn't handle it, or I wasn't good enough, whatever it was that their opinion was about me. Like, so I stopped allowing myself to think. With this year of rest that I've had, I've sort of, part of my mental and emotional self-care has become, I really think about what my strengths and achievements are, and I fucking have a lot of them. And how dare anybody make me feel like shit, or try to make me feel like shit about myself because I'm trying to have strengths and achievements. Wasn't that person before. I wasn't that person before. So when I was in a vulnerable place in my life, the people around me needed to be reminding me of what my strengths and what my achievements are, not kicking my ass while I was down and making me think about my shortcomings and my whatevers. Like who, what? And I allowed that to keep the peace, right? Because that's what we do. To keep the peace. Now I'm feeling like nobody needs to know what my strengths and my achievements are. I do. I know what they are. And I actively sit now and think about every now and again, wow.
I think that's awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. And fuck anybody who tries to make me feel like some kind of way about it anymore, because no, I'm pretty awesome when it comes to A, B, and C. I might suck at C and D, but you're not. Your world, other people's job is not to remind me of everything I suck about. It's not your job. That's my job. And also, if you're going to do it so that I can be a better person, not so that you can feel better about yourself and make me feel shitty about myself. So that little corner has been turned.
Yeah.
That is self-care. Like really taking care of what you're thinking and what you're feeling and what you're allowing yourself to remember about yourself. Just because other people feel some kind of way about it does not mean that you should shrink yourself so that they can feel comfortable, about whatever. I actually think that acts of kindness make a big difference for me. Little tiny acts of kindness, like my little raccoons, like feeding my mom's little birds, or taking care of, doing something kind for my dad that he doesn't even know that I'm doing for him. Like, he forgets to brush his hair. And I don't want him leaving the house looking like that. I don't mind when he's around us, looking like that. But I like to comb his hair and cut his hair and whatever. And that's an act of kindness that I do for him without making him feel like, damn, your hair looks messed up and Ghana, come over here. Hassling him about it, because I'm sure he doesn't feel too good about the fact that he can no longer do that. Yeah. So little tiny acts of kindness like that, I feel are important. Writing in a journal is a big deal for me right now. And that kind of stuff. Turning distractions off, man. I can't even tell you. So many of my clients talk about, or even people, friends, colleagues, they snoop on other people's social media. And I think we had a conversation about that, how you had to cut yourself off because you were just always on social media, or whatever. But I barely am on mine, or I barely am on mine anymore. But it's very interesting to me, the energy that it requires for other people to go on your social media and basically snoop. Not snoop, but just really, what's the word? Be that energy that it requires to see what other people are doing with it and then be upset about it because, it's the X this and the X that, or the other one, or the X run or whatever. Yeah. There's a lot of people that talk to me about that, and that I always wonder why.
Why waste your energy doing that?
What does it do for you? Yeah. It just only creates more, whatever the thing is that is not producing anything good. That is self-care, is not caring what's going on anybody else's social media. Just really, people disconnect from that. That is not healthy. Anyway, so anyway, there's I'm gonna put the whole list on the show notes, and people can choose and pick what works for them. And yes, you can have the bubble baths and do your nails and hang out with your girlfriend and do whatever night and all that. We're not saying don't do that, But we're just saying that in terms of mental health, we need to kind of turn the corner on the bubble bath and get more real about what we're talking about with, with self-care.
Exactly. Learn about yourself, learn about what you need, and then even if it's not fun, figure out what self-care you need to be doing. One self-care activity that I kind of joke around with my clients sometimes when we talk about self-care is crying.
Yeah.
I
let yourself feel it.
See crying as an act of self-care, especially if, like me, I always thought crying was a bad thing. So I went a very, very long time without crying. And now I've kind of realized, like, I'm feeling this kind of emotion I can't really put into words, but that's signaling to me, like, oh, I need to cry, And so I've gotten so comfortable. I'll tell my family, like, I'm going to go cry for a little bit.
And it's a natural process. Is how we get rid of a lot. It's how we process a lot of the feelings that we're having. That's why it's there. And that's why it feels good when you're done crying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't miss a good cry. I think, again, let's start viewing self-care as an essential rather than an indulgent. If you heard that, that's my alarm telling me I need to leave and go pick up my dad. So yeah, what's essential as opposed as to what's self-indulgent. And that's where I'm going to leave it. Like, what is essential for you to do to take care of yourself, and try to separate that from what is self-indulgent if you can. And don't judge yourself about the self-indulgent stuff. Just think about how we can kind of do both,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not selfish. That's important to remember too.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So that's it for the self-care. We'll definitely have a lot more information on our show notes for you guys to refer to and adapt, and hopefully, and let us know what your self-care is, and if you disagree with us, we want to hear what you have to say.
All right, thank you for listening.
All right, everyone.
See you
next time. Bye.
Hey everyone, Victoria here. Thanks for listening to Studio Talk. We hope you enjoyed our conversation into all things related to mental health. As always, you can head over to Studio Talk on YouTube or on Xiomara's website at thex-studio.org, where you can click on the podcast tab on the top menu. Sign up for our email list is there, as well as check out all the links and resources, including Xiomara's website, in the show notes. That's all for this episode, and we hope to see you next time. If you are experiencing any psychological distress, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.